The gunshot echoed across the plains like thunder, sending birds scattering into the azure sky as Penelope Armstrong clutched her bleeding arm and stumbled behind the cover of a weathered boulder. Arizona Territory, 1878, a place where survival demanded more than just courage. It required luck, and hers had just run dangerously thin. Penelope's breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed her back against the sun-warmed stone. The three riders who'd ambushed her stagecoach were still out there, having already dispatched the driver and her fellow passenger. The valuable land deeds hidden in her petticoats seemed impossibly heavy now, their promise of a new life fading with each drop of blood that stained her dusty traveling dress. "Come on out, lady," one of the men called, his voice carrying across the scrubland. "We don't mean to hurt you none. Just hand over them papers and we'll let you walk away." Penelope knew better. They'd seen her face. Their boss, whoever had hired these cutthroats, would never allow a witness to live. She closed her eyes, feeling the sting of hopeless tears threatening to fall. 22 years of life, and this was how it would end, bleeding out in the desert, miles from civilization. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her blood run cold. They were coming for her. Penelope fumbled with her reticule, extracting the small derringer her father had insisted she carry. 2 shots, 3 attackers. The math was cruelly simple. But then came the unexpected, more gunfire, but not directed at her hiding spot. Shouts of confusion, the thunder of galloping horses, and the unmistakable sound of bodies hitting the ground. Silence followed, broken only by the soft crunch of boots on gravel, approaching slowly. "You can come out now, madam. They've ridden off the ones that could still sit a saddle anyway." The voice was deep, unhurried, with the slight drawl of someone who'd spent years under the western sun. Penelope peered cautiously around the edge of the boulder to see a tall figure silhouetted against the harsh sunlight. He was lean and trail-worn, with a dust-covered duster hanging from broad shoulders. A weathered Stetson shadowed his features, but she could make out a strong jaw darkened by several days' growth of beard. A Winchester rifle rested comfortably in his hands, not aimed at her but ready all the same. "Who are you?" Penelope demanded, her derringer still clutched in her trembling hand. "Name's Griff Hayes," he replied, tilting his hat back to reveal eyes the color of a summer storm. "Most folks just call me Griff. Did they send you to finish the job?" She kept the tiny gun pointed at him, though they both knew it would do little good at this distance. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "If I wanted you dead, madam, we wouldn't be having this conversation." He nodded toward her bleeding arm. "You're hurt, let me help." "Why help me?" Penelope asked, suspicion and pain making her voice sharp. The cowboy's expression turned serious. "Because losing you would feel wrong." He holstered his revolver in a smooth motion and held up empty hands. "I've seen enough death in these parts. Don't aim to watch another innocent soul join the tally if I can prevent it." Something in his steady gaze made Penelope lower her weapon slightly. "How do I know I can trust you?" "You don't," Griff answered honestly. "But those men will be back with reinforcements once they lick their wounds. My camp's about 2 miles west, clean water, medical supplies, and no one looking to put a bullet in you. Your choice, madam." Penelope considered her options, which were painfully few. The stagecoach was destroyed, the driver dead. The nearest town was 20 miles away and night would fall within hours. Her arm throbbed mercilessly and she could feel weakness creeping through her limbs. "Very well, Mr. Hayes," she finally said, tucking the derringer back into her reticule. "It seems I have little choice but to accept your assistance." Griff nodded once, then whistled softly. A magnificent buckskin gelding trotted around the boulder, coming to stand obediently beside its master. "Can you ride?" "I grew up on a ranch in Colorado," Penelope replied with a hint of pride. "I could ride before I could walk." This earned her a genuine smile that transformed the cowboy's weathered face. "Good to know. Let me see that arm first, though." Despite her protests, Griff insisted on examining her wound before they departed. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the graze with water from his canteen and wrapped it with a clean bandana. "You're lucky," he commented. "Bullet just grazed you. Clean it properly at camp and you should heal fine." "Thank you," Penelope murmured, suddenly aware of how close he stood, the scent of leather and prairie sage surrounding him. Griff helped her gather what few belongings had survived the attack, then assisted her onto his horse. To her surprise, he didn't mount behind her but took the reins and began leading the buckskin on foot. "You don't have to walk," Penelope protested. "Phantom here's carried me plenty. He can rest a spell with just you." "Besides," Griff added, scanning the horizon with narrowed eyes, "harder to track one set of hoofprints than two." As they moved away from the site of the ambush, Penelope studied her unexpected rescuer. "You never said what brings you out here, Mr. Hayes." "Most men don't wander these parts without purpose. Most men with purpose out here aren't the kind you'd want to meet," he replied cryptically. After a moment, he elaborated. "I was a scout for the army. Now I do odd jobs. Guide settlers, hunt bounties when they need catching, deliver messages that can't trust the postal service." "And which of those occupations brings you to my rescue today?" Griff glanced up at her, his expression unreadable. "None of them. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time." Penelope didn't believe in such coincidences, but she kept her doubts to herself. For now, she needed this man's help, regardless of his true motives. The sun was beginning its descent when they reached Griff's camp, a small clearing near a shallow creek shaded by cottonwoods. A simple lean-to provided shelter, and the remains of a morning fire waited to be rekindled. "It's not much," Griff said as he helped her dismount, "but it's safe enough." Penelope nearly collapsed when her feet touched the ground, the day's events and blood loss finally taking their toll. Griff caught her with strong arms, steadying her against his chest. "Easy now," he murmured, his breath warm against her hair. "I'm fine," she insisted, though she made no immediate move to pull away from his support. "Just a moment of weakness." Griff settled her beside the fire pit, before tending to his horse and rekindling the flames. As twilight deepened around them, he prepared a simple meal of beans, jerky, and coffee that tasted better than any fine restaurant fare to Penelope's famished palate. Only after they'd eaten did he broach the subject they'd both been avoiding. "Those weren't ordinary bandits after you, they had purpose." It wasn't a question. Penelope studied the coffee in her tin cup. "No, they weren't random thieves. What are you carrying that's worth killing for?" She hesitated, weighing her options again. This man had saved her life, but trust came dear in the territories. Finally, she reached into her petticoat and withdrew a sealed packet of documents. "Land deeds," she explained, "for a silver mine near Tombstone. My father discovered it last year, but he needed investors. He found them in Boston, men with money but no desire to dirty their hands in the West. I was bringing the final papers when we were attacked." Griff nodded slowly. "Silver's good reason for murder out here. Where's your father now?" Penelope's throat tightened. "Dead. Fell ill on his return journey east. His last letter asked me to complete his business." She looked up, meeting Griff's gaze directly. "These papers are all I have left of him and his dream. I won't let them go without a fight. And those men." "You know who sent them?" "I suspect it was Malcolm Prescott," she replied, her voice hardening. "He's been trying to buy my father's claim since the beginning. When father refused to sell, Prescott made threats. We didn't take them seriously enough." Griff's expression darkened. "Prescott has a reputation. Controls half the mines around Tombstone through less than honest means. You know of him. Know enough to stay clear." Griff tossed another stick onto the fire. "Tombstone's still 3 days' ride from here. Those men will be looking for you every step of the way." Penelope straightened her shoulders. "I can pay you to escort me. I don't have much cash, but once these papers are filed, I'm not for hire at the moment," Griff interrupted, surprising her. "But I'm heading that direction anyway. Might as well travel together." She studied him, trying to discern his true intentions. "That's very generous, Mr. Hayes," he shrugged. "Get some rest. We leave at first light." As Penelope settled into the bedroll Griff provided, watching him take up position at the edge of camp, rifle across his knees, she wondered about the mysterious cowboy who'd appeared from nowhere to save her. There was more to Griff Hayes than he was revealing, she was certain of it. But for tonight, at least, she felt safer than she had since leaving Boston. Dawn broke in ribbons of gold and crimson across the eastern sky as Penelope awakened to the aroma of fresh coffee. Her arm ached dully, but Griff had already prepared fresh bandages and a poultice of herbs that smelled medicinal. Old Apache remedy, he explained when she inquired. Helps prevent infection. You lived among the Apache, Penelope asked, wincing slightly as he applied the mixture to her wound. For a time. Army had me scout for them during the campaigns, but I spent 2 winters with a peaceful band before that, learned more from them than I ever did in civilization. His fingers worked with practiced efficiency, rewrapping her arm. How's that feel? Better, thank you. Penelope was surprised to find it was true. The throbbing had subsided considerably. They broke camp efficiently, Penelope insisting on doing her share despite Griff's protests. Within an hour, they were mounted. Griff had fashioned a makeshift second saddle from his bedroll for Phantom and heading southwest toward Tombstone. The morning passed in companionable silence, broken occasionally by Griff pointing out landmarks or signs of wildlife. By midday, the terrain had changed from open prairie to more rugged country, with red rock formations rising like sentinels on the horizon. We'll stop at Cottonwood Springs tonight, Griff announced as they paused to rest the horse. There's a trading post run by an old friend. We can get supplies and maybe word of any unusual activity in the area. Won't that be dangerous? Penelope asked. If Prescott's men are searching for me. Safer than sleeping in the open, Griff replied. Besides, old Joe doesn't talk much, especially not to the kind of men Prescott employs. The trading post appeared as the sun began its descent, a low adobe building nestled against a hillside, with a corral for horses and a small garden plot improbably green against the arid landscape. Smoke curled from the chimney, and lantern light glowed in the windows. An elderly man with a long white beard emerged as they approached, a shotgun resting casually in the crook of his arm. His weathered face broke into a grin when he recognized Griff. Well, I'll be damned. Griffin Hayes, you ugly coyote, thought you'd been hung for sure by now. Griff dismounted with a laugh. Not yet, Joe, though not for lack of trying by some. The old man's sharp eyes moved to Penelope. And who might this lovely lady be? Finally found yourself a wife too good for you, Miss Penelope Armstrong, Griff introduced her formally. She's traveling to Tombstone on business. Miss Armstrong, this is Joseph McCready, former mountain man, current proprietor of the finest and only establishment within 50 miles. Pleased to meet you, Mr. McCready, Penelope said, accepting his help to dismount. Just Joe, miss. Any friend of Griff's is welcome here. Come in, come in. Got stew on the fire and news you might find interesting. The interior of the trading post was surprisingly comfortable, a large room with a stone fireplace, shelves stocked with necessities, and a small dining area. Joe bustled about, serving bowls of fragrant venison stew and pouring coffee for his guests. Only when they were seated did he lower his voice conspiratorially. 3 rough-looking fellows came through yesterday, asking questions about a woman traveling alone. Offered good money for information. Penelope felt her stomach tighten. Griff's expression remained neutral, but she noticed his hand drop casually closer to his holstered revolver. What did you tell them, Joe? Told them I hadn't seen a woman in these parts since that Pima gal passed through last month. Joe's eyes twinkled. They didn't believe me much, but they couldn't prove otherwise. Headed east toward Prescott, said something about checking the stage stops. East is good, Griff nodded. We're heading southwest. Joe studied Penelope with new interest. You the one they're looking for, miss? She hesitated, but Griff nodded slightly. Yes, she admitted. They ambushed my stagecoach yesterday. Mr. Hayes intervened. Always sticking your nose where it don't belong, Joe chuckled, addressing Griff. Some things never change. He turned back to Penelope. Don't you worry, miss. No one'll hear about you from me. Got a room in back you can use for the night, only one, I'm afraid, but there's a screen for privacy. After dinner, Joe and Griff fell into conversation about people and places unknown to Penelope. She excused herself to the small room, grateful for the chance to wash properly with the basin of water Joe provided. Her traveling dress was beyond salvation, torn and bloodstained, but she did her best to make herself presentable. The sound of a harmonica drifted through the thin walls, a haunting melody that spoke of loneliness and wide open spaces. Penelope stepped back into the main room to find Griff seated by the fire, the instrument held lightly in his scarred hands. His eyes were closed, his expression peaceful for the first time since she'd met him. Joe had disappeared, presumably to his own quarters, leaving them alone in the flickering firelight. Penelope stood silently, reluctant to interrupt the beautiful music, but Griff sensed her presence and opened his eyes. "My apologies," he said, lowering the harmonica. "Did I disturb you?" "Not at all," she assured him, moving closer to the fire. "It was lovely. I didn't know you played." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Not much call for music on the trail, but it passes the time. Penelope settled into a chair opposite him. "Where did you learn that melody? I don't believe I've heard it before." "Made it up, I suppose. Just follows where my thoughts lead." He twirled the harmonica in his fingers, looking slightly embarrassed at having been caught in such a vulnerable moment. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Hayes." "Griff," he corrected gently. "If we're going to be traveling together, might as well use my name." "Then you must call me Penelope," she replied. After a moment of comfortable silence, she asked, "Have you always lived out here in the territories?" Griff stared into the fire. "No, born in Virginia. Family had a small farm. After the war, there wasn't much left, so I headed west like so many others." "The war changed everything," Penelope agreed softly. "My family lost our plantation. Father came west to rebuild, sent for me only after he'd established himself in Colorado." "And now you're carrying on his work," Griff observed. "I'm trying, though I admit I didn't expect quite so much resistance." She rubbed her bandaged arm absently. Griff's eyes followed the movement. "Prescott won't stop. Men like him can't abide losing, especially to a woman." "Then it's fortunate I have you to even the odds," Penelope said with a small smile. His expression turned serious. "I can get you to Tombstone, but filing those papers is just the beginning. Prescott has influence there. You'll need more than legal documents to hold onto that mine." "I know," she admitted. "Father had partners lined up, the Boston investors. Once the papers are filed, I'll telegraph them. They'll send representatives, engineers, workers. And in the meantime," Penelope lifted her chin. "In the meantime, I'll manage." "I didn't come west to surrender at the first sign of trouble." Griff studied her for a long moment, respect evident in his gaze. "No, I don't believe you did." He returned the harmonica to his pocket and stood. "We should rest. Long ride tomorrow." The following morning brought cloudy skies and the promise of rain, unusual for the season, but welcome in the arid landscape. Joe provided them with fresh supplies and a second horse, a sturdy paint mare he insisted Penelope take. "Consider her payment for Griff's last job," the old man said with a wink. "He never did collect his due." Their farewell was brief, with Joe pressing a small package into Penelope's hands as she mounted. "Medicine for your arm," he explained, "and a little something to remember old Joe by." The something turned out to be a small silver pendant on a leather cord, a delicately crafted feather that caught the morning light. "It's beautiful," Penelope exclaimed. "But I couldn't possibly." "You keep it," Joe insisted. "Been sitting in my trading stock for years." "Needs a pretty neck to hang from." Touched by the unexpected gift, Penelope impulsively leaned down to kiss the old man's weathered cheek. "Thank you for everything." As they rode away, Griff commented, "You've made a friend for life there. Joe doesn't part with his treasures easily." "He's a kind soul," Penelope replied, fingering the pendant now hanging around her neck. "There aren't many left in this world." "More than you might think," Griff said. "Just harder to find sometimes." They made good progress through the morning, the threatening rain holding off as they followed a little-used trail through increasingly rugged country. Griff remained alert, frequently scanning the horizon and occasionally doubling back to ensure they weren't followed. By midday, they'd reached a narrow pass between towering red cliffs. Griff signaled for a halt, his expression concerned. "What is it?" Penelope asked, sensing his unease. "Don't like this spot, too easy for an ambush." He studied the cliffs above them, "But it's the quickest route south. Going around would add a day to our journey." "If you're worried about Prescott's men, it's not just them," Griff interrupted. "Apache renegades have been spotted in this region. Small band, but dangerous. Broke away from the reservation last month." Penelope felt a chill despite the warm day. "What do you suggest?" Griff considered their options. "We'll go through, but fast and quiet. Stay close to me." The pass proved narrower than it had appeared, barely wide enough for the horses to walk single file. Sheer walls of striated rock rose on either side, casting deep shadows across their path. The only sounds were the soft clopping of hooves on stone and the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. They were halfway through when Griff suddenly reined in, holding up a hand for silence. Penelope strained to hear what had alerted him, but detected nothing unusual. "Back," he whispered urgently. Now. Before they could turn their mounts, a cascade of small rocks clattered down from above. Penelope looked up to see dark silhouettes along the rim of the canyon, at least 6 men, rifles aimed directly at them. "That's far enough," called a familiar voice. One of the figures stood, revealing himself to be the leader of the men who had attacked the stagecoach. His left arm was bandaged, and a livid bruise discolored one side of his face. "Fancy meeting you here, miss, and you brought a friend this time." Griff's hand hovered near his revolver. "You're making a mistake," he called up to them. The man laughed. "Only mistake was letting the lady live last time. Boss wasn't happy about that, but we're going to fix it now." He gestured with his rifle. "Throw down your weapons or we start shooting. You might get 1 or 2 of us, but the lady won't survive." Penelope saw Griff quickly assess their position, outnumbered, outgunned, with no cover available. His jaw tightened in frustration. "Do as he says," she whispered. "Please, I don't want your death on my conscience." After a tense moment, Griff slowly raised his hands and dropped his revolver to the ground. "Your rifle too," the man demanded. "Slide it out of the scabbard real careful-like." Once they were disarmed, 2 of the men scrambled down the rocky slope to secure them. Rough hands pulled Penelope from her saddle, ignoring her protests. Griff moved to intervene but froze when a rifle barrel pressed against his temple. "Easy, hero," warned the man holding the weapon. "Boss wants to talk to the lady before anything permanent happens." They were bound and forced to walk, their horses confiscated. The leader, who identified himself only as Daggett, seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding Penelope of their previous encounter. "Thought you'd escaped, didn't you? Nobody crosses Malcolm Prescott and lives to tell about it." "He's got eyes everywhere. If Prescott wants my father's mine, he'll have to negotiate honestly," Penelope replied, trying to keep fear from her voice. Daggett laughed. "Negotiate? Lady, you don't understand how things work out here. Prescott doesn't negotiate, he takes what he wants. And murders those who stand in his way." Griff's tone was conversational, but his eyes were hard as flint. "Business is business," Daggett shrugged. "Nothing personal." They were led to a small camp hidden in a box canyon about a mile from the pass. A crude lean-to provided minimal shelter, and the remains of a fire smoldered in a ring of stones. 2 more men waited there, bringing their captors' total to 8. Penelope and Griff were secured to separate trees, their bonds painfully tight. While Daggett dispatched one of his men with a message for Prescott, the others settled in to wait, passing a bottle of whiskey between them. "How did they find us?" Penelope whispered when their guard's attention momentarily wavered. "Joe," Griff replied grimly. "They must have doubled back and forced him to talk." Horror filled Penelope. "Do you think Joe's tough, but he's an old man," Griff said, his expression grim. "Let's hope they just roughed him up a bit." As dusk approached, the men built up their fire and continued drinking. Their conversation grew louder, their laughter more raucous. Penelope tried to ignore their increasingly lewd comments directed her way, focusing instead on working at the ropes binding her wrists. "Prescott said to keep her alive until he arrives," Daggett reminded his men when one suggested having some fun with their female prisoner. "Didn't say nothing about what condition she needed to be in, though." He approached Penelope, crouching to examine her face in the firelight. "Pretty thing. Shame to waste it." His breath reeked of whiskey and tobacco as he reached out to touch her cheek, back away from her. Griff's voice cut through the night like a steel blade. Daggett turned, amused. "Or what, cowboy? You ain't exactly in a position to make demands." "Touch her and I'll kill you." The simple statement, delivered without emotion or bravado, caused even the drunk outlaw to hesitate. After a tense moment, Daggett laughed and stood. "Big talk from a man tied to a tree. Don't worry, your turn's coming too." Prescott was real specific about wanting to meet the man who interfered with his business. He rejoined his companions, but the exchange had sobered them somewhat. They posted a guard and settled down for the night, the whiskey finally taking its toll as they dropped into uneasy slumber one by one. Penelope continued working at her bonds, her wrists raw and bleeding from the effort. Across the clearing, she could see Griff doing the same, though he appeared to be making little progress. "Try to sleep," he whispered when he caught her watching him. "Save your strength." "For what?" she asked bitterly. "Prescott will be here tomorrow, and then we're both dead." "Trust me," Griff replied, his eyes reflecting the dying firelight. "I've been in worse situations." "How reassuring," Penelope muttered, but she did as he suggested, leaning her head back against the rough bark and closing her eyes. She must have dozed despite her fear, for she awakened to darkness and confusion. The fire had burned down to embers, casting just enough light to see that something was wrong. The guard who should have been watching them was slumped forward, unnaturally still. The other men lay scattered around the camp, none moving. "Griff," she whispered urgently. "I'm here." His voice came from directly behind her, startling her. His hands, somehow free, worked quickly at her bonds. "Don't make a sound." "What happened? How did you?" Later, he cut her off. "We need to move, now." As her ropes fell away, Penelope turned to see a scene of silent carnage. The outlaws weren't sleeping, they were dead, each with the fletched end of an arrow protruding from his chest or throat. The kills had been silent, methodical, and complete. "Apache," she breathed in terror. "Yes," Griff confirmed, leading her toward the horses. "The same band I mentioned earlier. They've been watching us since we entered the canyon." "Then why aren't we dead too?" Before Griff could answer, dark figures materialized from the shadows surrounding the camp. Lean, hard-faced men with ceremonial paint streaking their features, armed with bows and knives. Their leader stepped forward, a tall warrior with a single eagle feather in his hair and eyes like obsidian. To Penelope's astonishment, Griff addressed the man in a fluid language she didn't recognize. The warrior responded in kind, his expression impassive but not openly hostile. "What's happening?" Penelope whispered, fighting the urge to flee. "I'm explaining our situation," Griff replied quietly. "Their chief Nako knows me from before. I scouted with his father during the peace talks of '72. More words were exchanged, with occasional glances in Penelope's direction that made her intensely uncomfortable. "He says Prescott's men have been hunting in their territory, killing game and polluting water sources near their hiding places. They were planning to attack this camp tonight regardless of our presence." Griff paused. "I've asked for safe passage through their lands. He's considering it." After what seemed an eternity, the chief nodded once and spoke again. "We can go," Griff translated, "but not on the main trails. They'll guide us through their paths until we're beyond Prescott's immediate reach." "Can we trust them?" Penelope asked, eyeing the silent warriors. "More than most white men in these parts," Griff replied. "Nako has given his word. Among the Apache, that means something." Dawn found them high in the mountains, following game trails so faint Penelope would never have discovered them without guidance. 2 Apache scouts led the way, with Nako himself bringing up the rear. They moved with silent efficiency, stopping only when necessary for the horses to rest. During one such break, Penelope finally had a chance to question Griff about their unexpected allies. "You speak their language fluently," she observed. "That's uncommon for a scout, isn't it?" Griff shrugged. "Spent more time with them than most. Nako's father, Delgadito, taught me their ways when I was younger than you are now." "Is that why they spared us?" "Partly," he admitted. "But mostly because they hate Prescott more than they distrust whites in general. His mining operations have destroyed hunting grounds and sacred sites. They see us as enemies of their enemy. And that makes us friends." "Temporary allies," Griff corrected. "Don't mistake their help for friendship. We're useful to them right now, nothing more." By midday, they had descended into a hidden valley lush with unexpected greenery, a spring-fed oasis hidden from casual discovery by the surrounding cliffs. Here, Nako indicated they would rest properly. A small encampment was nestled among the tree's women, children, and elders who had fled the reservation with the warriors. They regarded the white strangers with wary curiosity as Nako explained their presence. An elderly woman approached, her face a map of wrinkles but her eyes sharp and clear. She spoke to Griff with evident recognition, touching his arm in a familiar gesture. "Nijoni," Griff said with genuine warmth. "I didn't expect to see you here. You know her?" Penelope asked. "Nako's grandmother. She treated my wounds after a skirmish years ago, taught me about healing plants." He turned to Penelope. "This is the woman who showed me how to make the poultice I used on your arm." Nijoni examined Penelope with frank interest, then spoke rapidly to Griff. Whatever she said made him uncomfortable, a flush rising beneath his tan. "What did she say?" Penelope asked when the old woman moved away, smiling to herself. "Nothing important," Griff muttered. "She's going to check your wound. Apache women are skilled healers." Under Nijoni's careful ministrations, Penelope's arm was unwrapped, cleaned with a fragrant solution, and dressed with fresh herbs. The old woman nodded approvingly at how well it was healing, then surprised Penelope by presenting her with a small beaded pouch. "Medicine," Griff explained. "And a blessing for safe journey. Please thank her for me," Penelope requested, touched by the unexpected kindness. As Griff translated, Nijoni laughed and patted Penelope's hand, speaking again at length. "She says you have a strong spirit," Griff translated, looking slightly embarrassed. "And that you, would make good children with the right man." Penelope felt heat rise to her cheeks. "Oh, please thank her for the compliment." The remainder of the day passed peacefully, with the Apache women sharing a meal of rabbit stew and wild greens with their unexpected guests. By evening, Nako announced they would leave at first light, taking a route that would bring them within a day's ride of Tombstone while avoiding the main trails where Prescott's men might be watching. As they settled for the night in a small wickiup provided for their use, Penelope found herself overwhelmed by the day's events. "Why did you really help me, Griff?" she asked suddenly. "Back at the stagecoach, the truth this time." He was silent so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed. "I knew who you were. Your father hired me 6 months ago to investigate Prescott after the first threats. I've been gathering evidence against him, building a case." "You knew my father." Penelope sat up straight, staring at him through the darkness. "Briefly. He was a good man, honest. When I heard he'd passed, I figured that was the end of it. Then rumors reached me about his daughter coming west with legal papers." Griff's voice was low, reflective. "I knew Prescott would make his move. I was tracking his men when they hit your stage." Penelope processed this revelation. "So all this time you've been, what, my unsolicited bodyguard, something like that. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? Would you have trusted me?" Griff asked reasonably. "A stranger claiming to work for your dead father." She had to admit he was right. "So what happens when we reach Tombstone? You collect your fee and disappear. Your father's payment died with him," Griff replied. "This isn't about money anymore." "Then what is it about?" In the dim light filtering through the wickiup's entrance, she could just make out his profile as he stared upward. "Justice, maybe. Or perhaps I'm just tired of men like Prescott taking whatever they want without consequence." Penelope studied him, seeing beyond the hard exterior to the man beneath a man with principles and honor in a land where both were in short supply. Something shifted in her perception of him, a warmth blooming in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not just for saving my life, but for believing in my father's cause." Griff turned toward her, their faces close in the confined space. For a moment, Penelope thought he might move closer still, but he merely nodded and turned away. "Get some sleep," he said gruffly. "Tomorrow will be challenging." True to Nako's word, they departed at first light, following a circuitous route through canyons and dry washes invisible to all but the most skilled trackers. By noon, they had emerged from Apache territory into the rolling hills that surrounded Tombstone. Here, Nako and his warriors prepared to leave them. The chief spoke briefly to Griff, who listened intently before clasping the Apache's forearm in a gesture of respect. "What did he say?" Penelope asked as they watched the warriors disappear into the landscape with remarkable speed. "That Prescott's influence extends into Tombstone itself. The marshal is in his pocket, as are several prominent businessmen. We should trust no one until the papers are filed and witnessed by multiple parties." Penelope felt a chill of apprehension. "Then we're still in danger, even in town." "Yes," Griff agreed. But we have one advantage now. Prescott believes we're dead. Daggett never delivered his message, and by the time they find the bodies, we'll have completed our business." They rode steadily through the afternoon, keeping to less traveled routes while making good time toward Tombstone. The landscape gradually transformed from wilderness to occasional signs of civilization, fenced ranches, the distant smoke of wood stoves, and finally the rutted wagon road that led to town. "We'll need a strategy," Griff said as they paused on a ridge overlooking Tombstone in the distance. "The county recorder's office closes at 4. It's nearly 3 now, so we're too late today. We'll need lodging for the night somewhere inconspicuous." "I have a letter of introduction to a Mrs. Thornfield," Penelope offered. "She runs a respectable boarding house. Father stayed there during his previous visits." Griff considered this. "That might work. We'll enter town separately. I'll secure rooms at Mrs. Thornfield's while you wait at the livery stable. Less chance of being recognized that way." As they approached the outskirts of Tombstone, the sounds and smells of the booming mining town reached them, the rhythmic pounding of stamp mills, the shouts of teamsters urging their mules, the mingled odors of wood smoke, dust, and humanity. Penelope felt both relief and trepidation. After days in the wilderness, civilization beckoned with its promise of safety and comfort. Yet danger still lurked here, perhaps more insidious than what they'd faced in the desert. "Remember," Griff cautioned as they neared the livery, "trust no one, not even Mrs. Thornfield until we're certain of her loyalties." Penelope nodded, suddenly reluctant to separate from him. "Be careful." A hint of a smile crossed his face. "Always am. Wait 1 hour. If I don't return, there's a Wells Fargo office 2 streets over. The agent there might help you." True to his word, Griff returned exactly 1 hour later, now clean-shaven and wearing a fresh shirt that transformed his appearance from rough frontiersman to respectable gentleman. "Mrs. Thornfield remembers your father fondly," he reported as they walked toward the boarding house, their horses stabled and their few belongings carried in a single satchel. "She's reserved her best room for you and a smaller one for me, introduced as your guide and business associate." The boarding house proved to be a tidy 2-story structure on a quiet side street, its white painted fence and curtained windows offering an oasis of respectability amid Tombstone's rougher establishments. Mrs. Thornfield herself, a plump, silver-haired widow with shrewd eyes and a no-nonsense manner, greeted them at the door. "Miss Armstrong, welcome to Tombstone," she said warmly. "Your father was a fine gentleman. I was deeply saddened to hear of his passing." "Thank you, Mrs. Thornfield," Penelope replied, immediately liking the forthright woman. "I'm grateful for your hospitality on such short notice." "Nonsense, dear. Any daughter of Jonathan Armstrong is welcome under my roof." She cast an appraising glance at Griff. "And Mr. Hayes has explained your business requirements. Rest assured, I am the soul of discretion." After being shown to their rooms connected by a shared sitting area that would allow them to confer privately, Penelope gratefully accepted the hot bath Mrs. Thornfield had prepared. Sinking into the steaming water, she felt days of trail dust and tension begin to dissolve. She emerged refreshed, dressed in the one clean outfit that had survived her journey, a simple blue cotton dress that had seen better days but would suffice until she could visit the local dressmaker. Griff was waiting in the sitting room, studying a map of Tombstone spread across the small table. He glanced up as she entered, his expression softening momentarily before returning to business. "The recorder's office opens at 8 tomorrow," he informed her. "I've scouted the location. It's on the main street, which means we'll be exposed, but also means there will be witnesses if Prescott tries anything overt." "And if he tries something less overt?" Penelope asked, settling into the chair opposite him. "That's why I'll be with you," Griff replied simply. "Once the papers are filed, we'll need to send telegrams immediately to your Boston investors. The sooner they have representatives here, the safer your position will be." Mrs. Thornfield provided a private dinner in their sitting room, a hearty meal of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh baked bread that reminded Penelope how long it had been since she'd enjoyed proper cooking. Even Griff, usually reserved, complimented their hostess enthusiastically. After dinner, as they finalized their plans for the morning, a knock at the door announced Mrs. Thornfield with evening coffee and an unexpected piece of information. "I thought you should know," she said quietly. "There was a man asking questions at the Grand Hotel about new arrivals in town." Described a young woman and a tall cowboy traveling together. Griff's hand moved instinctively toward his revolver. "Prescott's men, more likely Prescott himself," Mrs. Thornfield replied. "The description came from Martha Jenkins, who cleans rooms there. Said he was expensively dressed, city manners but hard eyes, offering good money for information." "How did he know we survived?" Penelope wondered aloud after their hostess departed. "He doesn't know for certain," Griff reasoned, "but he's covering his bases. If Daggett failed, this would be the logical next step." He paced the small room, thinking, "We'll need to move quickly tomorrow, file the papers at opening time, send the telegrams, and then consider our next move." "Which would be?" Penelope prompted. Griff stopped pacing to look at her directly. "Getting you safely away from Tombstone until your investors arrive with enough manpower to secure the mine." "Running away, you mean?" Penelope stood, indignant. "After everything we've been through to get here." "Not running strategic withdrawal," Griff countered. "The papers will be filed, the legal groundwork laid. But until you have protection beyond what I alone can provide, staying here is too dangerous." "I didn't come all this way to abandon my father's dream at the moment of success," Penelope argued. "This mine represents everything he worked for, everything I've risked my life for. And what good is the mine if you're dead?" Griff's voice rose in frustration. "Prescott doesn't play by the rules, Penelope. Legal ownership means nothing to men like him." Their argument was interrupted by another knock, more urgent this time. Mrs. Thornfield entered without waiting for a response, her face pale. "There are men watching the house," she whispered. "Just arrived, 2 on the corner, another across the street. They're trying to look casual, but Martha's boy spotted them on his way home from work." Griff moved swiftly to the window, carefully peering around the edge of the curtain. "She's right, Prescott's men." He turned to Penelope, his expression grim. "We need to leave. Now." "But all the exits will be watched," Penelope protested. Mrs. Thornfield's eyes gleamed with unexpected mischief. "Not all of them, dear. This house was built during less settled times. There's a reason I charge more for rooms than my competitors." She led them downstairs to the kitchen, where she opened what appeared to be a pantry door. Behind it lay a narrow passageway. "Mining tunnel," she explained. "Connects to 3 other buildings and eventually to an exit near the creek bed. My late husband was a cautious man who believed in having options." Griff clasped the widow's hand gratefully. "Mrs. Thornfield, you're a revelation." "Been called worse," she chuckled. "Now go, I'll misdirect them as long as possible." The tunnel was low and narrow, forcing them to proceed in single file, Griff leading with a small lantern Mrs. Thornfield had provided. The air was stale but breathable, the walls shored up with timbers that creaked ominously in places. "Where are we going?" Penelope whispered after they'd been walking for several minutes. "To find an ally," Griff replied cryptically. "Someone even Prescott hesitates to cross." The tunnel eventually opened into a cellar stacked with barrels and crates. Griff extinguished the lantern and motioned for Penelope to wait while he ascended a set of wooden stairs. He returned moments later and beckoned her to follow. They emerged into a storeroom filled with various goods, canned foods, dry goods, ammunition, and mining supplies. Beyond lay a proper shop, currently closed for the night but clearly a well-stocked general store. A tall, powerfully built man with iron gray hair and a magnificent mustache waited for them, a shotgun held casually in his hands. He nodded at Griff with recognition. "Hayes. Figured you'd turn up eventually when I heard about the trouble brewing." "Penelope, meet Samuel Greeley," Griff introduced. "Former Texas Ranger, current proprietor of Tombstone's finest mercantile, and the only honest businessman on the town council." "Miss Armstrong," Greeley acknowledged with a slight bow. "Your father was a customer, good man who knew quality merchandise when he saw it." He turned back to Griff. "Martha Thornfield sent word you might be visiting through the back door. Prescott's got men watching every hotel and boarding house in town." We need to file mining claim papers at the recorder's office tomorrow, Griff explained. Then get Miss Armstrong somewhere safe until her Eastern investors arrive. Greeley tugged thoughtfully at his mustache. Recorder's office will be watched by sunrise, but I might have a solution. He gestured for them to follow him to a small office at the rear of the store, a map of Tombstone hung on the wall, streets and buildings carefully labeled. Greeley pointed to a structure near the courthouse. Deputy Recorder Lives here Jenkins. Decent fellow, not in Prescott's pocket. He has authority to accept filings after hours in emergencies. Would he consider this an emergency? Penelope asked. For the right compensation, Greeley replied frankly. And the promise of future business from Eastern mining interests. The plan came together quickly. Greeley would escort Penelope to Jenkins' home while Griff created a diversion to draw Prescott's watchers away from Mrs. Thornfield's boarding house. They would rendezvous at Greeley's store afterward to send the necessary telegrams using his private wire. What about getting Miss Armstrong out of town? Griff asked. Greeley smiled for the first time, revealing a gold tooth. Stage leaves for Tucson at dawn. Driver owes me a favor. He'll take on passengers without asking questions. As Greeley prepared to leave with Penelope, Griff pulled her aside. This is our best chance, he said quietly. File the papers, send the telegrams, then take the stage to Tucson. Wait there for your investors. And you? Penelope asked, suddenly reluctant to be separated from him. I'll follow when I can. Prescott will be looking for both of us together. Traveling separately improves your chances. Something in his tone alarmed her. You're planning something dangerous, aren't you? Griff's expression gave nothing away. Just creating a necessary diversion, nothing I haven't done before. Promise me you'll be careful, Penelope insisted, impulsively taking his hand. I couldn't bear it if, she stopped, surprised by the intensity of her own feelings. Griff's eyes softened as he looked down at their joined hands. I'll meet you in Tucson, he promised. 2 days from now at the Occidental Hotel. Greeley cleared his throat pointedly. Time to move, folks, night won't last forever. Penelope made a sudden decision, rising on tiptoe to press a quick kiss to Griff's cheek. For luck, she whispered, then turned to follow Greeley before Griff could respond. The night air was cool as they slipped through Tombstone's back alleys, avoiding the main streets where Prescott's men might be watching. Greeley moved with surprising stealth for such a large man, guiding Penelope confidently through the darkened town. Deputy Recorder Jenkins proved to be a nervous but honest official who, after some persuasion and the promise of future business, agreed to file Penelope's papers immediately. With trembling hands, she signed the final documents that secured her father's legacy, while Jenkins affixed the official seal that made them legally binding. Congratulations, Miss Armstrong, Jenkins said as he handed her the receipt. You are now the registered owner of the Silver Crescent mine, with all rights and privileges thereto. A weight lifted from Penelope's shoulders. Whatever happened next, her father's discovery was legally hers. No one, not even Malcolm Prescott, could take that away without due process of law. Their return to Greeley's store was uneventful, but Griff had not yet arrived. While they waited, Greeley helped Penelope compose telegrams to her father's Boston investors, informing them of the successful filing and requesting immediate assistance. This wire goes directly to the main telegraph office, Greeley explained as he tapped out the messages. Bypasses the local operator, who reports to Prescott. An hour passed with no sign of Griff. Penelope paced anxiously while Greeley cleaned his shotgun with methodical precision. He knows what he's doing, the storekeeper assured her. Hayes has been in tighter spots than this. You seem to know him well, Penelope observed. Greeley nodded. Served together briefly during the Apache campaigns. He was a scout, I was still with the Rangers. Saved my life at Rattlesnake Canyon when a band of warriors had us pinned down. He examined a shotgun shell carefully before loading it. Not many men I'd trust with my life. He's one of them. Another hour dragged by. Outside, the first hints of dawn lightened the eastern sky. The stage to Tucson would be preparing to depart soon. We should go, Greeley finally said. The stage won't wait and you need to be on it. I can't leave without knowing he's safe, Penelope protested. He'd want you to go, Greeley countered gently. The whole point was getting you safely away. Before Penelope could argue further, the back door opened quietly. Griff entered, his shirt torn and bloodied, a fresh cut above his right eye. "What happened?" Penelope gasped, rushing to his side. "Ran into some of Prescott's men," he replied grimly. "They won't be following us anytime soon." "Did you kill them?" Greeley asked bluntly. "No, just convinced them to reconsider their employment options." Griff winced as Penelope dabbed at the cut on his forehead with her handkerchief. "The papers, filed and recorded," she confirmed, "and the telegrams are sent." "Then it's time to leave," Griff said. "The stage won't be running today," Greeley interrupted, peering through the front window. "Prescott's figured out what's happening. He's got men at the stage office and every road out of town." Griff cursed softly. "He's desperate. Must have realized the Apache didn't leave any witnesses at Daggett's camp." "So we're trapped?" Penelope asked. "Not necessarily," Greeley mused. "There's still one way out he might not be watching. Mining supply train leaves for Benson at noon. From there, you could catch the Southern Pacific East or West." "A freight train," Penelope looked dubious. "Not ideal," Griff admitted, "but our best option now. Greeley, can you arrange passage?" "Consider it done. The conductor's brother-in-law buys all his dynamite from me at special rates." Greeley glanced at the brightening sky. "You can't stay here, though. Prescott will search every building in town once he realizes you've filed those papers." "Where then?" Griff asked. Greeley considered for a moment. "The old assay office, been abandoned since the new one opened. It's just a shell, but the basement's sound. Nobody goes there anymore. They say it's haunted." With a plan in place, they prepared to move. Greeley provided food, water, and a small revolver for Penelope, who tucked it into her pocket with determined practicality. "I hope I won't need to use this," she said, "but my father taught me how." The abandoned assay office proved to be a dilapidated structure on the edge of town, its windows boarded up, and its door secured with a rusty padlock that Griff easily broke. Inside, dust covered everything, and the floorboards creaked ominously underfoot. A trapdoor led to the basement, a surprisingly clean space where ore samples had once been stored. A small window near the ceiling provided minimal light, but was too small to serve as an entrance. "It's not the Oriental Hotel," Griff apologized as they settled in to wait, "but it should be safe until train time." "I've slept in worse places recently," Penelope replied with a small smile. "At least there are no scorpions here, I hope." The hours passed slowly. They spoke little, both aware that discovery would mean danger. Griff cleaned his weapons methodically while Penelope reviewed the documents that officially granted her ownership of the Silver Crescent mine. "What will you do with it?" Griff asked eventually. "Once your investors secure it, I mean." Penelope looked up from the papers. "Develop it properly. Father believed it could be one of the richest strikes in the territory if worked with modern methods. The Boston Consortium has engineers and equipment that could transform it. And your role?" "I'll oversee their interests and mine," she replied firmly. "I may be a woman, but I understand mining operations. Father made certain of that." Griff studied her with newfound respect. "I believe you would succeed, too." "What about you?" Penelope asked. "After this is over, where will you go?" He shrugged. "Back to scouting, I suppose, or maybe find some quiet place to raise horses. Never really thought beyond the next job." "That sounds lonely," Penelope observed softly. "It's the life I know," Griff replied, though something in his tone suggested he'd been considering alternatives. A sudden commotion outside interrupted their conversation, voices shouting orders, the sound of doors being kicked in. Prescott's men were searching buildings, and they were getting closer. Griff motioned for silence, drawing his revolver as footsteps approached their hiding place. The door above creaked open, and dust filtered down through the floorboards as someone entered the main room. Heavy boots crossed the floor directly overhead. Both Griff and Penelope held their breath as the intruder paused, seemingly considering whether to investigate further. After what felt like an eternity, the footsteps receded and the door slammed shut. "That was too close," Penelope whispered, her heart pounding. "And it means they're running out of places to search," Griff replied grimly. "We need to move now while they're checking elsewhere." Cautiously, they emerged from the basement and peered through a crack in the boarded windows. The The street appeared momentarily clear, Prescott's men having moved to buildings farther down. "The freight yard is 3 blocks south," Griff said. "We'll have to risk it. Stay close to me." They slipped out the back door and into an alley cluttered with discarded crates and barrels. Moving from shadow to shadow, they made steady progress toward the freight yard, freezing occasionally when voices or footsteps approached. They were 1 block from safety when disaster struck. Rounding a corner, they came face to face with a well-dressed man flanked by 2 armed guards. Even without introduction, Penelope knew instantly who he was. "Malcolm Prescott, I presume," she said coldly. The man smiled, revealing perfect teeth beneath a meticulously groomed mustache. In his 50s, with silver at his temples and the florid complexion of someone who enjoyed fine dining, he projected an air of absolute authority. "Miss Armstrong," he replied with mock cordiality. "I've been looking forward to making your acquaintance. Your father spoke highly of you before his unfortunate passing." "You knew my father?" Penelope asked, momentarily confused. "Of course. We discussed his silver strike at length. I offered him a very generous price, which he unwisely declined." Prescott's smile never reached his cold eyes. "I was deeply saddened to hear of his untimely death. Heart failure, wasn't it? So unexpected in a man of his apparent health." The implication was unmistakable. Penelope felt her blood turn to ice. "You had him killed." "Such accusations are unbecoming, my dear." Prescott turned his attention to Griff. "And Mr. Hayes, your reputation precedes you. I understand you've been quite persistent in your interference with my business interests." "Just evening the odds," Griff replied, his hand hovering near his holstered revolver. Prescott noticed the movement. "I wouldn't if I were you. My men are excellent marksmen, and I would hate to see Miss Armstrong caught in crossfire." "What do you want, Prescott?" Penelope demanded, fighting to keep her voice steady. "The same thing I wanted from your father, the Silver Crescent mine." "I understand you've filed the final papers. Congratulations. Now you can legally sell it to me." He withdrew an envelope from his jacket pocket. "I have a bill of sale prepared. Sign it and you can leave Tombstone alive. Refuse and, well," he gestured vaguely. "Never," Penelope stated flatly. "That mine was my father's legacy. I won't dishonor his memory by handing it to his murderer." Prescott sighed dramatically. "I was afraid you might be difficult about this. Your father had the same misplaced sense of principle." He nodded to his men. "Take them to my office. Perhaps Miss Armstrong will be more reasonable after she's had time to consider her limited options." Before the guards could move, a voice called from behind them. "That won't be necessary, Prescott." Samuel Greeley stood at the end of the alley, his shotgun leveled at the group. Beside him stood a distinguished gentleman in an Eastern suit, accompanied by several hard-looking men with badges pinned to their vests. "You're interfering in a private business matter, Greeley," Prescott snapped. "I suggest you leave while you still can." "This stopped being private when you started killing people," Greeley replied evenly. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Robert Langdon of the Pinkerton Detective Agency, hired by Miss Armstrong's Boston investors to investigate Jonathan Armstrong's death." The distinguished gentleman stepped forward. "Malcolm Prescott, you're under investigation for the murder of Jonathan Armstrong, attempted murder of his daughter, and numerous other crimes against persons and property in Arizona territory." Prescott's face darkened with rage. "This is absurd. You have no jurisdiction here. Marshal Turner has been relieved of duty pending investigation into corruption charges," Agent Langdon completed smoothly. "These gentlemen represent the federal marshal's office. They do have jurisdiction." Prescott's guards, sensing the changing tide, slowly lowered their weapons. Prescott himself seemed to shrink before their eyes, his confidence evaporating as he realized his carefully constructed empire was crumbling. "This isn't over," he hissed as the federal deputies moved to take him into custody. "I have friends in high places. You'll never make these charges stick." "We have witnesses," Agent Langdon replied calmly, "including several of your former employees who have decided cooperation with authorities is preferable to hanging." He turned to Penelope. "Miss Armstrong, I apologize for not revealing myself sooner. We needed Prescott to make his move openly." "You used us as bait," Griff observed, not entirely disapproving. A calculated risk, Langdon admitted. But we've been monitoring the situation since you filed the papers this morning. Prescott's desperation made him careless. As Prescott was led away, still protesting his innocence and threatening retribution, Penelope felt an overwhelming wave of emotion relief, vindication, and a profound sense that her father could finally rest in peace. "Is it really over?" she asked Agent Langdon. "The immediate danger, yes," he confirmed. "Prescott will face trial, and with the evidence we've gathered, conviction is all but certain. As for the Silver Crescent mine, your Boston investors are quite eager to begin development. Their representatives arrive tomorrow on the eastbound train." Greeley cleared his throat. "I believe this calls for a celebration. My store has a case of French champagne that's been waiting for a suitable occasion." Later, in the private dining room above Greeley's store, Penelope found herself raising a toast with Agent Langdon, Greeley, and Griff. The relief of safety, combined with the champagne, had brought a flush to her cheeks and a lightness to her spirit she hadn't felt since before her father's death. "To Jonathan Armstrong," Langdon proposed, "a man of vision and integrity." "And to his daughter," Greeley added, "who proved to be cut from the same cloth." As the men discussed the logistics of securing the mine and the likely outcome of Prescott's trial, Penelope found herself watching Griff. He had spoken little during the celebration, his expression thoughtful as he sipped his champagne. When the others became engrossed in conversation about the latest mining technology, Penelope moved to sit beside him. "You're unusually quiet," she observed. Griff shrugged. "Just thinking." "About what happens next," she guessed. "Something like that." He met her gaze directly. "You'll be staying in Tombstone, I presume, to oversee the mine development." "That's the plan," Penelope confirmed. "The investors want someone they trust on site, and I want to see my father's dream realized." She hesitated. "What about you? Still planning to find that quiet place to raise horses?" A smile touched the corner of his mouth. "The thought has crossed my mind." "There's good grazing land near the Silver Crescent," Penelope said carefully. "The property includes more acreage than we'll need for mining operations." Griff studied her for a long moment. "Are you offering me a job, Miss Armstrong?" "No," she replied, gathering her courage. "I'm suggesting a partnership, of sorts." Understanding dawned in his eyes. "That would be quite unconventional." "I believe we've established that I'm not a conventional woman," Penelope said, her heart pounding. "And conventional men don't typically risk their lives for strangers in the desert." "You're not a stranger anymore," Griff pointed out softly. "No," she agreed. "I'm not." Something changed in his expression, a warmth that transformed his weather-beaten features and made him suddenly, startlingly handsome. He took her hand, his touch gentle yet sure. "A partnership," he repeated thoughtfully. "I might be amenable to discussing terms." Penelope smiled, emboldened by his response. "The terms are simple. You stay, help me build something meaningful, and perhaps we discover if what began as necessity might grow into something more." "When you put it that way," Griff murmured, "how could I possibly refuse?" Their first kiss was witnessed only by the setting sun streaming through the window, painting the room in shades of gold and amber, a fitting beginning for a future forged in the unforgiving crucible of the Arizona desert, where danger had brought them together, but choice would keep them so. 3 months later, the Silver Crescent mine was fully operational, employing over 50 men and already producing ore rich enough to justify the Boston investors' faith. The main shaft had been expanded, modern equipment installed, and a small community had sprung up around the mine site. Penelope had proven herself an able administrator, earning the respect of miners and investors alike with her fair dealings and practical approach to problems. Her father would have been proud of how she transformed his discovery into a thriving enterprise. Griff, true to his word, had remained. He'd purchased land adjacent to the mine property and started a modest horse breeding operation, focusing on sturdy mounts suited to the demanding desert environment. But more often than not, he could be found at Penelope's side, offering counsel, protection, and increasingly, affection that grew more evident with each passing day. On a crisp autumn evening, they stood together on the porch of the house, they'd built overlooking both the mine and Griff's grazing lands. The setting sun gilded the landscape, transforming the harsh desert into a canvas of ethereal beauty. "I received a letter from Agent Langdon today," Penelope mentioned, leaning comfortably against Griff's shoulder. "Prescott's been convicted on all counts, 20 years in federal prison. Justice served," Griff nodded. "Your father would be satisfied." "I think he would be," she agreed. "Though I believe he'd be even more pleased by what we've built here." Griff's arm tightened around her waist. "We've done well. The mine's producing beyond expectations. My horses are finding buyers as far away as California, and Tombstone's finally getting civilized enough that a person can walk down the street without counting bullets first." Penelope turned in his embrace to face him. "There's just one thing missing." "Oh," Griff raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "This," she replied, reaching into her pocket to withdraw a simple gold band. "I believe it's customary for the man to provide this, but since when have we done anything in the customary way?" Griff stared at the ring in astonishment. "Penelope Armstrong, are you proposing to me?" "I am," she confirmed, a hint of nervousness beneath her determined expression. "Our partnership has proven successful in business. I believe it would be equally so in marriage." A slow smile spread across Griff's face. "That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard." "Well, if you prefer romance," Penelope retorted, feigning offense. "I could mention that I've fallen desperately in love with you, that I can't imagine my life without you in it, and that I want nothing more than to wake up beside you every morning for the rest of our days." Griff's expression softened as he took the ring from her palm. "Now that," he said, slipping it onto his finger where it fit perfectly, "is a proposal I can accept." Their kiss sealed more than a betrothal. It affirmed a bond forged through danger and strengthened by choice. A partnership between equals who had found in each other the missing pieces of themselves. The wedding took place 2 weeks later in Tombstone's newly constructed church, with Samuel Greeley giving the bride away and Mrs. Thornfield weeping joyfully in the front pew. The Boston investors sent extravagant gifts and their heartfelt congratulations, along with confirmation that Penelope would retain her position as mine administrator, unusual for a married woman. But as they noted, Mrs. Hayes has proven herself exceptional in all regards. As the years passed, the Silver Crescent mine continued to prosper, as did Griff's horse breeding business. Their home expanded to accommodate first a son, named Jonathan after Penelope's father, and later twin daughters who inherited their mother's determination and their father's love of wide open spaces. Tombstone grew from a rough mining camp into a proper town, with Greeley serving as mayor for 3 consecutive terms. Mrs. Thornfield's boarding house became the town's finest hotel, catering to Eastern investors and the occasional curious tourist drawn by tales of the Wild West. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Griff presented Penelope with a deed to a cottage by the sea in California, a place to escape the desert heat during the harshest summer months. She, in turn, gave him the news that the Silver Crescent had just opened a new vein that promised to be the richest yet. That night, as they sat on their porch watching the stars emerge in the velvet sky, Penelope rested her head on her husband's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that day by the stagecoach?" she asked. "When I asked why you were helping me?" "Often," Griff admitted, his fingers laced with hers. "Best decision I ever made. Because losing me would have felt wrong," she teased, repeating his words from so long ago. Griff turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the same emotion that had sustained them through a decade of challenges and triumphs. "No," he corrected gently. "Because finding you felt right." In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, its lonesome cry echoing across the desert that had brought them together, a harsh land that demanded courage and rewarded perseverance, much like love itself. For Penelope and Griff Hayes, the journey that had begun with danger and desperation had led to a destination neither could have imagined. A home built on mutual respect, shared purpose, and a love as enduring as the mountains that guarded their silver mine. The legacy they created would outlast even the silver that had first drawn them to this remote corner of the Arizona Territory, a legacy of honor, determination, and the belief that even in the wildest of circumstances, two hearts might find their perfect match.